So here we are again, episode 22 of the Two Russells podcast. So let me see, Mr. Quirk, since we had Sue on here talking about all things health and that you've got to look after yourself, what changes have you made?
Let me think. None. No, I, in all seriousness, and I know it was a kind of timely episode, wasn't it, in terms of it being the start to the year. Obviously, everyone had Christmas and New Year and probably overdid everything. I think the message definitely is, look, as you get a bit older, like you are, for instance, you have to start to think about looking after yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and it was really interesting, her journey and the education, and yet again, somebody who has bounced back from a difficult situation to build a business and take it on.
But the other thing, apart from physical health, that it really starts to make you think about is this subject, which we don't talk about enough, which is men's mental health. Now, I know mental health obviously affects everybody, but men aren't very good at talking about it. So I know we're going to talk about that in future episodes.
We are, yeah. A couple of very interesting people who are passionately talking about mental health coming up. But today, we're talking to an absolute giant of the mortgage industry in more ways than one. In more ways than one. Welcome to the Group CEO, Rob Jupp, Group CEO of Brightstar. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to see
thank
you.
you for the segue of health and being overweight at this time of year.
It wasn't
It makes me
personal.
feel even more uncomfortable now.
It
but
wasn't
thank you
personal.
anyway.
And we've got you on because we've messed up a couple of times, so we've got to apologise that live on air.
Don't worry, it's no problem.
Well, no, I was going to spin it that we're that popular and so in demand that we just haven't been able to get Rob in, even though he keeps turning up at the studio saying, "Can I be on your podcast, please?"
Just once, actually. Let's just be clear. Just once. Just once.
And you saw me running away, so I feel really bad. So, Rob, tell us about what's happening in Brightstar right today. What's happening in your world at this moment as we enter 2025?
Yet another new year. So this is my 15th new year of running this business. Business I started in 2011. We're up to 5 group companies now. We have just under 100 headcount. We turn over around £15 million per annum. And we remain the UK's largest specialist distributor of property debt. So we do in excess of £1.5 billion per annum. We deal
as
with
in money lent that you organise.
Correct. We deal with over 70% of the UK mortgage intermediary market on long-term contracts. Okay. So there aren't that many companies that we don't have a commercial relationship with, and it's a bit of a grand old dame now, a bit like me, really. You know, it covers all areas. With a B2B business, we have a B2C business, Sirius, which is in the city, which deals with more quirky, high net worth stuff. We have 17 advisors there. We have a new company that is looking to be a lender, private label, an insurance company, Soulstar, and also a tech business, Launchpad. So that's the 5 businesses. So we're very, very busy, and every new year starts as it should do as an entrepreneur, feeling really upbeat and positive. But this year, particularly for me, feels like a really important moment.
Do you think a challenging year this year?
I don't, actually. I think no more challenging than most other years. I think, you should always come into every year feeling there'll be challenges ahead. I think what you don't do is you don't necessarily look in advance for what those challenges are going to be, because sometimes they can be a bit self-fulfilling. I think, you just, as an entrepreneur and as an owner manager, you just look ahead and you face any challenge that you have. There aren't that many new challenges now, I have to say. Having been running businesses for almost 3 decades now, there's not that many challenges I haven't seen, and haven't got within my mental store the opportunity of overcoming them. So nothing really intimidates me.
A new government, I mean, so your business is 15 years old, obviously new government for the first time, a Labour government after 14 years. Yeah. From the point of view of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor with a fake CV.
Or Rachel from accounts.
It's not going great. So that doesn't concern you in terms of kind of Labour fiscal policy and how that might squeeze, in particular, sentiment, I suppose, how people feel about buying and, activity in the property market. Doesn't you don't see that as a challenge?
Not massively, no. I mean, I think a fact that you won't like, Labour governments generally are pretty good for the housing market. There's been more growth under the three most recent Labour governments in the housing market than any Conservative governments over
I
the
think
last
Tony
30
Blair
years.
was the biggest growth, wasn't
Right,
it,
okay.
in property?
Yeah, he was the slight, and we don't want to go down a political rabbit hole here, but I just can't help myself. We haven't since the 1970s had what I would call a socialist government, which Tony Blair was not. This is so. I'm an optimist generally. I actually think the first half of this year for the property market would be great. Obviously, as we shoot this, we had inflation numbers out yesterday, and we've got GDP numbers out today, which were positive-ish. So I think that sends a decent message to the market and indeed to the Bank of England in terms of maybe a rate cut in February, which obviously is all good for us.
Gilt levels yesterday, gilt rates had the largest fall for some time.
20 points.
Yeah, so that's positive as
So
well.
so that's buoyed your confidence, I suppose.
Look, every single year, you have to start with the premise that there will be challenges ahead, right? There always is. There's never you never go into this 12-month, smooth sort of mill pond type ocean. There's always currents. There's always undertones. There's always things that catch you when things are going well. I mean, COVID. The mini budget. The war in Ukraine. The war in the Middle East. And there's been so many, and over 30 years, I've seen so many come and go. So you just become battle hardened. You don't fear anything.
So your positivity is because I guess no matter what is thrown, certainly at the UK property market, it does seem that it's made of Teflon. I mean, Ukraine, COVID and so on, it does seem that regardless, people still buy, people still enter the market, there's still positivity. And I think also, apart from there being some kind of consumer confidence despite all that stuff going on, it does seem that, business owners like you, for instance, entrepreneurs and employers, wealth creators, no matter almost what's going on within government, you kind of flip your two fingers up at them and say, "But I'm going to crack on."
Yeah.
And I think, and I want to come. I want to go back
Well, you have
15
to.
or 20 years in your career in a minute just to talk about what might inspire that. But you do have to grab it by the horns and get on regardless.
100%. Estate agents that I've been talking to just feel that they haven't got any obstacles in their way for the rest of this year. They sort of know what they're dealing with. They know they've got minimum wage coming. They know they've got the national insurance increase. So they're known, but they haven't got unknowns. So they're going to crack on. But 30 years in business, as you mentioned, let's rewind that a little bit if we can, Rob. So where did it all start for you? So let's take us back to the beginning, and then we can talk about when you had to pick Russell up off the floor along the way.
Yeah, well, on more than one occasion, I'm sure of that. So I think if you want to run your own business, you just know, right? I was university educated, the first person in my extended family to get to that point. I was a straight A student, A level, when there was just A's as the top, not A stars. Got to a good university, did a good degree, and then just started in the mortgage industry because that was the only job in 92, 93 in a recession I could frankly get that would pay me a decent salary. So I did that. I was really good at it.
Who was that with?
Countrywide.
Okay.
Countrywide was Hambros. So I became one of their top consultants in the country. When they had 800, I was top 5.
So were you agency based?
Yeah. I was sitting in the back of a Bairstow Eaves estate agent.
Right.
Whereabouts? Which one?
Wickford, Benfleet, and lastly Basildon.
Okay.
Which was our
Salt
flagship.
of the earth, gritty, cold-faced Essex.
Brilliant.
Huge office, that Basildon
Massive,
office, wasn't it? Just before the
office.
entrance to the shopping centre.
I mean, some months we used to do over 100 sales in that office.
I think
It's
Steve
phenomenal.
Roo's still there, isn't he?
It probably is. I hope he's still alive.
Shout out, Steve. There you go.
He's a great guy, great guy. So, I started there and I was good, did really well, became top in that particular part of the company, top 5 in the UK. And then back in the day, you had to, like football, tell a good story and get your round in. I was good at all 3 of those. That was the basis of getting promoted, and if you need to do the job well. So all 4, I ticked all the boxes. So I became a manager, director, the youngest at the time in the history of Countrywide. And after 2 years, I thought, this is just not for me. I can do better than this. This is not going to give me the social mobility and materialism that I want for my family. So the only way of doing that was to go on my own, which is what I did. I got the top advisor in the group, convinced him he needed to come into business with me and change his life. And I went back to the coalface and did the job that probably I hadn't done for a few years. And that's the start.
So you became an advisor, but for yourself?
Yeah, I became an advisor. That business started with 2.
So no income at that point for you. So where were you in your life? You bought a house, owned a house?
Bought a house just before we got married. We didn't have children at the time. I think that's a big thing. But yeah, had a big mortgage, had bills and stuff to pay.
How old were you?
27. 27. So 26 actually. I got married at 27, 3 or 4 months later. So commission only, no
guaranteed
backing,
salary,
nothing.
What would your wife to be say? What was she saying at that point?
Yeah, she's always backed me. She always knew that I would look to try and get her support, and if I didn't get her support, I'd probably end up doing it anyway because I'd backed myself. So, you know, the basic secret of everyone's success is hard work, right? We can all agree with that. You know, the harder you work, the luckier you get, as Gary Player famously said. So I worked really hard. I turned that business from 2 people up to over 150.
What was that called?
That was called OFM Group. And
OFM.
we had a non-conforming packager, which is where the real value came in. And back in the early summer of 2007, a now defunct American investment bank offered us just under £40 million to acquire the whole group. So we just didn't think it was enough at that time. We thought we were worth a lot more. And 14 months later, we sold it to Savills PLC for less than £100,000 just to pay for their insolvency costs.
Wow.
So that was...
Because let's be honest, it was going to go bust.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, the context here is 2008, 2009. And the fact that pretty much anybody in business, particularly in the property sector, whether they were an agent, a house builder, or a lender or a broker, was in real trouble. Volumes dropped by whatever 50%.
We lost 92% of our business within 1 month.
Yeah, and you can't count
92%.
So let's talk about that a sec, because that brings us to the reference that Russell just made. So the first time you and I met was literally you picking me up off the floor of the Towngate Theatre at a Property Awards event where my cousin, my business partner at the time, Anthony, and I had got in a little scuffle with a competitor.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't go there, really. And you and I were known to each other because obviously you were running OFM, you were doing the mortgage business for a competitor of ours, Homes Pearman.
Yeah.
I actually reached out to you to say, we're a bit bigger than them as Quert Deakin, you know, in my traditional estate agency days where we had offices in Basildon, Canvey and Grays and so on. And you actually very professionally said, I'd love to, but I'm committed to the Homes Pearman boys. That was that, all very lovely, until, you picked me up off the floor at the Towngate Theatre.
Yeah, happy days. I remember the next day, my wife saying, who's that flash twat outside in their Porsche parked in our driveway? And you got out. And I was like, well, that's Russell Quert. It's got to be. But
Some things don't change.
No,
I actually came around to your house because we lived on the same development, which I didn't realise.
Yeah,
and I knocked on your door to apologise, which some people might not realise I'm capable of doing.
Well
but I
done.
did do that.
You did apologise. And certainly... we've become good friends since, actually.
Yeah. So let's talk about that time, because I think it's fair to say that was about 2002, 2003, so 22 years ago. You were on a roll. I remember specifically that you were expanding into new offices almost every couple of years. I remember that vividly. Yeah. And some of us were thinking, wow, where's this going? Like, this guy's on a mission. Then it went wrong, as it did for many of us. Talk us through that time when that month of dropping 92% of your revenue, the realisation that the business was going to go. Talk us through how you felt about that, both from the point of view of obviously the business that you built. I mean, obviously that's it's not a very nice place to be in terms of the fact that that's going to fall by the wayside, but particularly how you feel, from a humility point of view, but also how you tackle your family at that time, where Claire says to you, Rob, what the fuck?
That was £39.9 million.
Yeah. So talk us through that time.
Yeah. Well, I had 2 children. I had our youngest was only 3 months old. Our eldest had just started at Brentwood School, a private school, and we had school fees. I had it feels like a fairly small mortgage now, but £750,000 mortgage on our house. No one forced me to do any of those things. That was a choice. I had absolute obsession with social mobility. So the reality of, and my wife wasn't working, the reality of everything came back to me. 150 staff and their families relied on me, was a really difficult thing. And I think there was definitely, talk about mental health in men, there was a definite fallout from poor mental health in the years ahead as a result of that. But it's kind of, you just, at that point when you're going through it, you just have to try and survive. And survival just looks like, I need to make sure that I can afford my mortgage. I can pay my mortgage, not afford it. I can try and keep my son at school.
But were you worried that you wouldn't be able to afford to pay for those things?
Every day, possibly 100 times a day, right? I mean, that,
And you went to work for the Savills business that
yeah.
So you then have to go and work for somebody, which is a horrendous thing to have to do after you're self-employed.
And actually, I was fortunate. The people I went to work with were good guys. They were, having their own challenges for sure. Everyone, you mentioned earlier, everyone had in 08 to 10 particularly, everyone had a challenge. No one was immune to it. So, they bought the business 4 days before Lehman Brothers collapsed, and our main customer was Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. These massive worldwide global businesses that were always too big to fail. You put your money into American banks, you'd never lose it.
Yeah.
Within a few days, we lost all of our customers.
But tell me how you dealt with it. What's going on in your head? And I know Claire very well, so she's very supportive.
Yeah.
A great individual. Did you hide your fear and your emotions from Claire because you didn't want to worry her?
Yeah, I did. Very much so. I took everything on my own. I didn't share with anyone, friends, family.
Is it healthy, do you think?
No, not at all. Terrible. Worst thing you can possibly do. Because at times, a lot of the stuff that I was ruminating about was just nonsense. I just needed someone to say, that's nonsense.
What, the problem was bigger in your head because you're not sharing it with anyone?
Well, I mean, it's big anyway. Let's be fair. I mean, having the inability to provide for your family is a big enough issue.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? About men take that responsibility.
What makes you feel like a failure as a man?
Doesn't it? And maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe our children, if they're lads, I've got 2 lads. When they become our age, they won't be like that. But we're maybe of the last generation that feels different.
That don't talk.
Right. We didn't talk. So it was difficult. And I said to my wife back in October, I was out of work. I'd resigned from my job at Savills because I was expecting to get lots of good offers, and I didn't. I got some offers, but nothing that would keep my family in the lifestyle that I wanted to. And so the only outcome I had was to start my own business again. I remember one day saying to Claire, right, I'm going to start my own company. She said, okay.
But didn't she say, hang on, we've been there?
Yeah, but she said, it didn't end great last time. What have we got to lose? And I said, well, whatever we've got left, we've got a bit of equity in the house, which I'm going to have to put on the line. I won't be able to keep our son in school much longer. So that's a foregone. So there's a chance I could do that. She said, well, what have you got to gain? I said, well, if you back me, I'll give it 100%. I work every available hour, and I will give it the very, very best chance of it surviving. And, fast forward, we met again at that Regis office. You were in there. You started eMove. And said,
I just started eMove.
Right,
Literally, I walked past me in the corridor. I said, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
He said, I've gone again.
Yeah,
So you've got a phone, you've got a black book of people.
But it was just you and 2 others.
Yeah, me and 2 others, both boys still in the business now. All of that. And 3 phones in a 2-man office, 3 desks. Fortunately, one of my co-workers, Brad, was really skinny, and Kitten and I were both fat. So he was kind of skinny Vinny in the corner, and us 2 were just against the walls. And we had a whiteboard, and Kit said to us on first day, right, I've got the website. What do you think? I said, yeah, put the home of the UK's leading specialist distributor. He went, well, we're not. We're just open. We haven't taken a call. We haven't taken a lead. I went, we will be self-fulfilling.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Right. What happens if someone sues us? I said, well, worry about that end when it happens.
Yeah.
And
But we would have done some business by then, and it would be worth it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the hard work really starts, and I'm back on the coalface. And for the first, and the first 4 years, I was top consultant in my growing group every single year while running the business, by recruiting,
Walking the talk.
right. But often staying. My oldest son wants to be a lawyer, and he's talking about Magic Circle, and he's saying they do 100-hour weeks. How would you do it? I went, I did it. I've done it. That was part of it.
I think most entrepreneurs have, but also if they've got the bravery to go again, which you've kind of glossed over, if you don't mind me saying, it's a pretty difficult thing to pull yourself up 3 or 4 years after a business failure and to say, despite that, maybe because of that, maybe because you learn from it, I'm going to go again.
And the problem is, right, and when you put your head above the parapet, and we'll all know this really, really well, it'll get shot off. So it's all great when everything's going well, but when you have some vulnerability, i.e. you have a business that fails, let's call it as it is, you're there to be shot by everyone, where you've been lauded as this and that. So it wasn't just seemingly losing everything. It was all the demonisation of my personal brand.
Yeah,
Actually,
and it's very hard to separate.
really
This is me, a real person,
Right.
and this is a business.
Yeah.
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 You, it's very hard to separate that as you, isn't it? To go, well, no, that's the business I really wanted to push and
Well, it
brand
is you. And
try.
unfortunately, in Britain, we have this culture where, and I know this, you've only got to look at the comments probably right now on Property Industry Eye with regard to something I've written recently. We get this situation where the majority of people don't take risk. They don't want to put themselves out there, although they do want success. They probably go and buy a lottery ticket every Saturday, ironically. However, they see people like Rob, for instance,
They take insurance
successful. They get a bit jealous, Then he fails and they think, excellent.
There we go.
Told
Glad
you.
he's failed
Yeah.
because now it makes me feel better about my lack of ability.
That's
Why are
absolutely
we
spot
like
on.
that as Brits?
I don't know. It's
a horrible
It's
trait.
counterintuitive, right? And we do it for everybody in every wake of life: sportsmen, business people, politicians, the whole shooting match. But the point is, when you got two options: you lie down and die, and you accept that your time has been and gone, or you fight, and you fight harder than you've ever fought before, and you work harder than you've ever fought before, and you convince others around you that they should follow you, and you're gonna lead, and you're gonna take them to the promised land. And when you do, then all of a sudden you look behind you, and you've got a small army of followers, and then you rebuild stuff, and you actually, you've got to be self-reflective, and you've got to say, well, I'm a bit older. What did I do last time that I don't want to do this time to have a better chance of success?
But also, what did you do that was right and worked, which you can then replicate?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that...
And as a leader, how do you do that? Are you doing that with an external voice that you're talking to, or are you doing that with your leadership team, or is it all inclusive at Brightstar? How are you sharing those views?
So our culture is amongst the best, I think, around. We won in 2019 and 2020 the Sunday Times Best Company to Work For. We came first. We didn't get into the 100. We came first. In 2020, we achieved the highest score in the history of the Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For. So we don't just walk the walk, we talk the talk. Our culture is fantastic. But ultimately, it comes from a leader, but it needs to be shared by acolytes. Right? It does, because there's only one of you, and actually, as time goes on, you become less effective because there's more stakeholders. So we've got a brilliant people development CPO, Chief People Officer, my wife Claire, who's fully ingrained in the business, and all her job is to keep people happy and motivated. That's her full-time job. Right. That's what she does.
Fantastic.
That's the only thing she needs to do.
She's almost chief culture officer.
Right, she is, correct. Yeah. And everyone has coaching, and they have one-to-ones. We do personality profiling for everyone. We share that with all of our stakeholders. We share our own ones as well. So we are absolute leading lights in that. And that means that our productivity per advisor is almost double our peer group. Our staff retention is the best around. And we've got people, over half of our business have been with us for over 5 years, and a third of the business have been with us over 10 years.
Fantastic.
Talk to us about, you mentioned awards. I think it's clear that obviously you've won lots of awards.
Yeah.
Businessman of the Year.
And maybe partly because of your culture and the way you treat staff and the way that those staff members then become advocates, and obviously that then rolls and rolls and rolls. But I think also you have probably won a lot of awards, and I don't know how many it is now, so not just the Sunday Times stuff, but industry awards. You've won, dozens, I think it's fair to say.
Hundreds, actually.
Hundreds, right, there you go. I've been in your office, I've seen the cabinet, and it's it's like Lewis Hamilton's front room.
And we're no longer going for awards now.
Right, well, this is what I want to ask, right? Because you have been distinctly under the radar over the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, when I asked you to do this, I thought you were going to say no.
Yeah.
Because you used to be a bit like me, a bit like Russ, LinkedIn all the time, Twitter.
I was trying to do my research, couldn't find you.
You made a concerted decision a little while ago to come off of social media. Now, for someone with your profile and someone that's in the B2B business environment, that was a bold but very surprising thing for someone to do. Can you talk us through why?
Yeah, it was partly to do with mental health. I was finding myself becoming... No, in fact, I wasn't becoming. I was entirely addicted to social media. I was spending a disproportionate amount of my working week on it, posting, looking, and getting really quite wound up by a lot of the content. And I got to a point one day, and I was thinking, I got the the Microsoft reports you get once a week in terms
screen
of
time.
Yeah. And I'd spent a working day in that week on social media, a working day. I'm like, well, what else could I do? So it was just something I did there and then. I just went, okay, I don't want this anymore. I backed myself to be more successful without the need for social media. And I deleted my LinkedIn account. I deleted my Twitter X account. Didn't do one of these posts to say I'm coming off it. I just deleted it, right? And I'm like, okay. And actually, interestingly enough, people are far more inquisitive now and far more likely to engage with me because they don't hear me, they don't see me.
But do you think it affected new business, or do you think you got to such a stage, and you are very, very well known, do you think you got to a stage now where you almost said, right, social media's kind of helped get me there, I don't need it anymore, and so it hasn't affected new business?
No, not at all. And also, it starts to affect the value chain of my business, because if I am when we talk to investors, as we do from time to time, their big issue and their big concern is, well, what happens if you're not involved in that business anymore? And obviously,
so it needs to run without you, doesn't it?
And social media can often give an illusion of the value chain of an individual.
So have you just told us something there that perhaps you didn't mean to, that it was all part of the strategy because of your exit strategy?
There's a deep down, intricate feeling of giving lots of feedback. So no, it wasn't deliberately that. It was more about, I just don't want this anymore. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of people like you know what I mean? I just don't want any more of this. I've decided against it. And what I want to do is I want to be a bit more introspective. I've spent a bit more time on my business. I'm a trustee of two charities. I'm president of a local rugby club. I've got more than enough to do as it stands without having this waste of time for them.
So we're in 2025. Yeah. You missed out on the cash out back in 2007.
Yeah.
What's next for Brightstar?
Okay, so I got part cash out in 2015. So 4 years into the business, we sold part of our business to a PE house, which was a great capital event for my family. We reacquired that back from the PE house 2 years ago.
Okay. Why? You just didn't like working with a PE?
No, they were fine. It's just part of their process was they were going to become a bank, and when they didn't become a bank, there was no value chain for us. So
you thought they'd potentially be a source of lending funds?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Cheap lending funds for our own white labelled lending.
Got it.
So when they didn't, it was apparent that there was no real value chain for us to them, and probably them for us. So we arranged a decent deal. And what I've done for the last 2 years is we've slowly but surely been reacquiring capital in the business. We've been buying shareholders out to own more of it ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I now own over 50% of the group again, which is fantastic, which means I'm fully in control, which is great. But ultimately, we will sell the business at some point. We have lots of people that are enthusiastic and want to court us and would like to do a deal. And at some point, a deal's going to be right for me to go, you know what, that's great. And actually, it's one of those that means I move away from the industry and from the business. I don't stay in it.
Well, put your feet up for once.
Well, there's lots of...
It sounds like you've been on the hamster wheel for 20 years.
There's so much to do, man. There's so much to do. Right, and in terms of legacy is not how much money I make out of this business. Legacy is what I do in the world when I'm dead.
And how you're remembered.
Right.
Yeah.
When you look at that point, if there's a 27-year-old sitting there working as a mortgage broker or estate agent or any business at the moment out there right now thinking, I've got a burning desire to get out there and do something for myself, but I've got a mortgage, and I think that's more prevalent now. I've got a mortgage, I've got commitments, I've got this, I can't do it, I need a guaranteed salary. What's your advice to them, Rob? What would you say to the 27-year-old you, again, if you were listening to
Well, I mean, if they're thinking like that, they're thinking different from most people, because most people don't think like that. Most people go, I want more in life, but I don't know how to get it. If they're thinking the only way I can get this is to do my own thing, they're ahead of the curve. They're in the small number of people that are leading the race. I think you just need to understand however hard you've worked, expect to work much, much harder. However much you think your business plan's going to go, it won't. It will go probably worse for a period of time. If you think you can survive on a small amount of cash, double it and treble it, because you'll need plenty of money, because the things that
people worry about going into that debt to go up, don't they?
You kind of have to, really. And also, don't expect to go to a bank and say, well, can you lend me some money? Because they won't do, because they have no interest in lending money.
They're much less likely to do now than probably ever.
Absolutely, unless it's attached to your house and everything else. But similarly, if you've accepted all those things, just go for it, because actually, what's the worst that can happen? You can fail, right? We failed, right?
Yep.
We've had businesses that have failed.
But it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant.
You
to fail.
learn so much
I think it's
more about
brilliant.
yourself from failure than you do about success.
Yeah, yeah.
And you go again and you're stronger, better.
Yeah.
Most clients who earn have got a value of over 100 million have got at least 2 failed businesses.
Yeah, and people don't tend to talk about those because they only see the success.
And that is a theme in 21 so far of these podcasts.
Yeah, and definitely, I think failure is not just something that should not be seen as critical and terminal. I think failure is essential, because if you don't fail, you don't know your limits. If you don't fail, you don't learn anything, and then you don't go on to do the next stuff. Before we go, because I suspect we've probably got to wrap up in a minute, a couple of things that people might not know about you. Where does fish and chips figure in your history?
Yeah, my parents owned a fish and chip shop. That's the family business. You know, we are from very ordinary stock.
So do you think that's where you get your entrepreneurial spirit?
It's probably where I get my figure from. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, we were peeling potatoes and helping out at my mum and dad's shop when we were 7.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a serious point. You can see that your mum and dad...
for 12p for a pack.
But your mum and dad have taken risk. They work for themselves.
Yeah,
There's no safety net.
Yeah.
But also you see what hard work really looks
Yeah,
like. And that I would imagine that has now figured in your journey, because you look at that, like I do actually, because my family were, business people, entrepreneurs. You look at it as kind of, well, that's just the way life is.
Yes.
You just crack on and you do
work
something
hard.
yourself and so
Work
on.
hard, you get paid back.
So that's important.
Yeah.
Something else though, I did ask one of your colleagues about stuff that perhaps people might not know about you. And he said this: you're a big fan of cheesy dance floor music. So I'm playing this.
It's a great track.
Because a great track.
One of the best.
I've now got an image of a 6'6" Rob Jupp in a white suit and a black shirt on the dance floor at Raquel's in Basildon. Am I right?
Yeah. You remember me? Actually, I was more like to be at Raquel's on the door, preventing you from getting in.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
say Raquel's, some say Raquel's.
Raquel's.
Depends
Yeah,
whether you're from
yeah,
Billericay or
yeah,
Basildon.
I did.
It was always a scary place for me to go Basildon or
was.
Billericay that way.
And
what was the one in Southend? What was that?
Tots.
Tots, that's it. Yeah.
Tots. Of the chaps at Rettendon that got taken out were all clients of mine, actually.
Oh, well.
Yeah, there we go.
As long as you weren't clients of theirs.
No, I wasn't the fifth man either.
That's been a fascinating journey, Rob. If people want to get in touch with you, as you're not on social media, how do they reach out to find out more about
Osmosis.
you?
Yeah.
They can't.
Rob.jupp at thebrightstargroup.co.uk is the best way. But you'll get people, won't you? You'll always get people. You'll always find people.
Yeah.
They'll find me.
Fabulous.
They'll find
Well,
me.
mate, thank you
I've
very
been
much.
a lay-by in Rettendon.
No, seriously, very informative, very inspiring, and very candid. So, another great episode.
Another great episode. So that's it. That's a wrap. Episode 22 in the can. Look out for episode 23 coming up, where we delve a little bit deeper into the world of acquisition in the property world, which I'm sure will be interesting to lots of people.
Indeed.
I reckon he might try and buy us, Russell. Who
That'd be
knows?
nice,
He
actually.
buys
Well,
everything.
Now we're on episode 23 or whatever we are, then I would imagine we've got superb value.
So all it is for me to say is it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.